Cooper, Associate Director of CG. We're at the G8 Summit at the Media Center. We're very pleased to have with us Keith Porter from the Stanley Foundation. Keith is going to talk about US multilateralism and how security and economics interplay.
We know that there's lots of hope for the Obama administration, indeed for President Obama. At the same time, we also know that there's a lot of ambivalence about the progress of US multilateralism. Can you explain the dilemma to us?
Well, we have a president who clearly believes in multilateral institutions. This is a person who has used some famous quotes about how involvement in these institutions strengthens us rather than weakens us, and you hear a lot of people, critics of the organization, saying that our involvement in them weakens our sovereignty and weakens our security. We have an administration, we have a president who believes just the opposite, that involvement in these organizations, that working with other nations, in fact, makes us more secure. And I think that's a major change, and I think it's a welcome one.
You work for an important foundation. What is the role of think tanks, foundations in the United States to try to shape multilateralism in the way that you want it to?
I think we're lucky that we have a number of organizations in the United States that are well-funded and well-staffed with some very capable people who think about these issues a lot and who really put a lot of effort into figuring out not just how the United States can benefit from something, but how global security can be enhanced. One of the things we talk about a lot is that U.S. national security is a product of global security. That the more secure the world is, the more secure we are, and the more unstable and insecure the world is, the more insecure we are. And we need to think about our foreign policy in those terms. There are a lot of think tanks out there that do just that, that say these particular actions by the United States will lead to a more insecure world, will lead to greater instability. And it may not happen today, it may not happen tomorrow, but sooner or later, that instability will hurt us. So instead of doing that, we ought to be looking at what kind of policies can we have that will make the world more secure, the world more stable. And once that happens, U.S. national security seems to follow naturally.
We've got a lot of Gs. The G8, of course, where we're talking from today, also the G20. What is your model for the future in terms of the Gs?
You know, our organization, the Stanley Foundation, has worked on multilateralism for more than 50 years, and we've been a supporter, sometimes a critic, but a constructive critic, of the United Nations and other multilateral institutions over those years. I think that right now we're seeing a vast weakness in the existing multilateral organizations, the post-World War II organizations. And because of that weakness, you can't have a vacuum. We see things like the G8 and the G20 actually becoming even more important. They're filling a vacuum. It's a place where world leaders can come together and actually talk about important issues. When you see the General Assembly sort of unable to tackle big things, the Security Council functions quite well, but it lacks legitimacy because its membership hasn't changed over 50 years. So where can these nations come together to really talk about serious issues? The G8 has served a function over the course of the years, but also it hasn't really embraced fully those emerging powers. They have through the Outreach 5 and have started to make it, but they've really been pushed to include them even more by the existence of the G20. What we're seeing now is that we have all these world leaders, maybe up to 40 of them coming to L'Aquila. I think it'll be the same cast of characters, except maybe for turnovers in governments, when they gather again in September in Pittsburgh. So you have sort of a rolling meeting now of important heads of state. They are truly representative of the world power structure. And they're also sharing agenda items. With so many things that came out of London, people here are talking about whether or not what was left undone in London can be done here or reviewed. What are we going to do here that's going to kick things off for Pittsburgh? So now we have sort of a rolling set of meetings with a constant sort of set of participants who can really get things done. It's really up to them, though. This is a matter of political will. You can come here and have your photo taken with other big leaders and get your approval rating boosted. You can get your ego boosted, right? We need them to do more. We need to actually, I think one of the things we can do as think tanks, one of the things we can do as citizens of the world is have greater expectations for these kind of meetings. Don't just come here for a photo op. Don't just come here for a lowest common denominator, this is the best we could do sort of final communique. Take action. Do something very real. And talk about how it interfaces with other organizations. What are you going, we have the P5, the permanent 5 of the UN Security Council are here. Well, what are they going to do after the meeting ends? Are they going to go to the Security Council and demand action? We have all of the votes needed at the IMF and the World Bank to do anything in the world are represented at the table here. Are they going to go and take action when they leave Italy? Those are the kind of things that we need to be holding them accountable for.
On priorities, we're in the middle of a recession, a global recession. It's quite obvious that a lot of the attention of the leaders will be focused very much on core concerns about the finance and the economy. At the same time, your interest and Stanley Foundation is interested in security issues. How do you see security issues playing out in the Gs?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Andy. Our organization doesn't really do a lot on economics and development. We do a lot on non-proliferation and multilateral global governance kind of issues. So we're really trying to figure out how these things do interact. We're very much interested, for example, in securing loose nuclear material. The Obama administration is very much interested in this. They've called a global summit for the first quarter of next year, and we're figuring out how we can leverage these G meetings leading up to that to actually have some progress at that global summit on securing vulnerable nuclear material. That's an issue that's very big for us. Other issues that are important for the world, what to do about Iran, what to do about North Korea. These are at least as important as the global financial crisis, and I think ought to be carving out their own space on the agenda. Now, how we do that, I'm not exactly sure, but I think it's tied up in what I said before about the greater expectations. If this is a place where they talk about important issues, then Iran is going to be on the table. North Korea is going to be on the table. Loose nuclear material is going to be on the table. So we want them to just expand their notion of what can be discussed at these things, and I think the rest will sort of come naturally.